I lied to my employee, not out of anger, not out of ego, out of necessity. That sentence sounds colder than it felt when I said it, because when you're running a company that's bleeding money and smiling in the reports, lying stops being a sin. It becomes a tool. I remember that night vividly. The hum of servers, the smell of burnt coffee, the endless glow of spreadsheets that looked perfect on paper and wrong in my gut. His name was Daniel Price, our CFO. The board called him a prodigy. A numbers guy who makes miracles happen, they'd say, clapping him on the back after another record quarter. But miracles don't balance ledgers, and numbers that clean, that consistent, that impossible, they rot from somewhere. I'd been running this company for 7 years. I'd seen panic, crisis, even fraud once, but never this quiet, elegant kind. The kind that smiles at you in board meetings and kills you in silence. It started small. Delayed invoices from outside vendors, a duplicated payment ID that shouldn't exist, then a pattern. Same amounts, rounded neatly, routed through shell contractors, approved in the same week Daniel joined. When I asked for documentation, he laughed. Come on, you don't need to micromanage me. Focus on the big picture. The big picture was that our margins were suddenly optimized. The small picture was that something didn't add up. I raised it with the board once. They smiled politely and reminded me that Daniel had saved the company's last acquisition. Don't start an internal witch hunt, Thomas, one of them said. The man's delivering results. Delivering results. That's corporate code for don't ask questions while the numbers are green. So I stopped asking, and I started watching. I installed silent access logs. Every file, every midnight edit, every unauthorized copy now left a fingerprint. I wanted proof, not suspicion, not gossip. Proof. 2 weeks later, I got my first clue. A Sunday upload at 2:43 a.m. from Daniel's credentials into a folder labeled Q4 Compliance Draft. A folder I had locked behind executive approval. The timestamp hit me harder than the content. Sunday, 2:43 a.m. I checked the security footage. Nothing. Our new system didn't cover that wing after hours. The board had cut the budget for it last quarter. Of course they had. So I lied. I told Daniel the auditors had found discrepancies in our Q2 reports and that we were freezing all financial folders until further notice. I told him not to touch anything, not a line, not a cell, until the audit resumed. It wasn't true. There was no audit. There was only me, a single camera I'd installed that afternoon, and a sensor log connected to my phone. He nodded calmly, like a man with nothing to hide. Good call, he said. Transparency first. That night, I waited in my office. Everyone was gone. The only light came from the server rack through the glass wall, a dull blue pulse that felt like a heartbeat. I watched the screen of my phone, eyes fixed on the silent dashboard. Midnight. 1 a.m. 1:40. Nothing. Then a ping. Access detected. Finance archive, Daniel Price. Unauthorized. The air went still. Another ping. Files copied. Files deleted. I stood up slowly, the way you do when a gun cocks somewhere you can't see. Through the hallway glass, I saw the red recording light blink once. The security camera I'd set up, just a pinhole near the smoke detector. And then his reflection in the glass door. Daniel, sleeves rolled up, laptop under his arm, eyes darting. He looked like a man rearranging evidence, not doing overtime. My chest went tight. This was it. The lie meeting the truth halfway. He exited 5 minutes later, calm as a surgeon. Didn't even look up at the lens. I let him go. I didn't confront him. Confrontations give people stories. Silence gives them rope. I waited another hour, backed up the footage, encrypted the logs, and copied everything onto a clean drive. By the time I left the building, the sky was starting to pale. My reflection in the glass doors looked like someone else, tired, older, but alive. When I got home, I didn't sleep. I just sat on the couch, phone buzzing with unread board emails. None of them knew what I'd seen. Not yet. Tomorrow I'd show them. Tomorrow they'd know I wasn't crazy. But I didn't know then that tonight was just the first lie, and the morning after would change everything. But that was just the beginning. I didn't sleep that night. I told myself it was the adrenaline, but it was more than that. It was anger disguised as exhaustion. By the time the sun came up, I'd already replayed that footage 5 times. The way Daniel moved, how he hesitated before pulling the external drive, how his eyes flicked toward the corridor like he could feel being watched. There was no panic, just intent. At 8 a.m., I walked into the office with the kind of calm that frightens people who've done something wrong. Daniel was already there, early, unusually early, making coffee in the break room like nothing had happened. "Rough night?" he asked, casual. "Didn't sleep," I said, which was the truth. He smirked. "Audits will do that to you." I smiled back. "Yeah, they really will." He had no idea. That smile was my firewall, keeping the rage in, keeping the truth safe until it mattered. I spent the morning assembling everything, the video, the access logs, the backup reports he'd deleted, the invoices with mismatched vendor codes. Every clue that looked meaningless on its own now formed a perfect pattern. At 11:30, a meeting invite popped up. Quarterly forecast review, hosted by Daniel Price. I almost laughed. He still had the audacity to present forecasts. The boardroom was bright, sterile, all glass and polite nods. Daniel opened with a slide full of growth curves and buzzwords: momentum, velocity, upside potential. His voice had that glossy tone executives love because it makes them feel rich. But the numbers, God, the numbers, they were fiction printed in PowerPoint. "Any questions?" he asked, 30 minutes in. I looked straight at him. "Yeah, about vendor 3814, the consulting group in Boston. Do we have their physical address?" He blinked. "Sure, it's in the file. Why?" "Because their tax registration traces back to a P.O. box in Delaware," I said, leaning back. "And the account number matches a holding entity created 4 months ago, the one your signature authorized." The room went quiet. Chairs creaked. Someone's pen hit the table. He gave a little laugh, the fake, confident kind. "Thomas, you're mixing up entities again. Those are umbrella accounts. Standard structure." "Right," I said, "except the umbrella just happens to transfer money every Friday to a fund managed by your wife's cousin." His jaw tightened, but his smile stayed. "You're overreaching." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I just opened my laptop and mirrored my screen onto the board display. The first image was the security footage. Timestamp, 2:43 a.m., Sunday. Daniel froze. "Last night," I said quietly, "after the audit freeze, I told everyone to leave those files untouched, but you didn't." He stood, face pale now. "You recorded me." "I protected company property," I said. "You call it what you want." Someone at the table, Harold, one of the old board members, cleared his throat. "Thomas, that's a serious accusation." I turned the sound up. The video played the hum of the data center, the light flicker, the click of a USB drive, and Daniel's voice, faint but clear. "Come on, come on." No one spoke. When the clip ended, I said, "I have copies of every file he deleted, every transfer authorized under his credentials, and every payment chain leading to 3 shell vendors registered under the same Delaware agent." Daniel's face twisted between panic and fury. "You had no right to—" "I had every right to defend this company when the board refused to listen," I cut in. He opened his mouth again, but Harold raised a hand. "Sit down, Daniel." That was the first crack in the wall. He sat. He didn't look at me anymore. He stared at the table like it might swallow him. And for a second, a stupid, fleeting second, I almost felt sorry for him. The kind of pity that comes right before you remember what they took from you. That was when my phone buzzed. A new alert. Access attempt. Admin console. Finance root. User D. Price. He was trying to wipe something remotely. Right there. In the room. I reached over, unplugged the network cable from his laptop, and dropped it on the table. "You just confirmed everything I needed." The IT director, 2 seats down, turned to me. We can lock him out entirely. Do it! Daniel looked up, eyes burning. You don't get to... But I did. The screen on the wall flickered again, this time showing the email he'd sent to the shell vendor 12 hours earlier. Move the balance by morning. Delay reconciliation. There it was. The moment the lie met daylight, the silence that followed was suffocating. You could hear the hum of the projector, the distant drone of the HVAC. Finally, Harold spoke, voice low. Gentlemen, I think we've seen enough. I looked around the table. No one met my eyes, but every one of them looked shaken, like they'd just watched a magician reveal his trick and realized it was never magic, just theft. Daniel leaned back, breathing hard. You're finished, he said. You think they'll trust you after this stunt? I smiled, not with joy, but with the kind of tired certainty that comes after too much truth. Maybe not, I said, but at least they'll know who not to trust. He stood up, shoved his chair back, and stormed out. No one stopped him. When the door closed, the boardroom stayed quiet for a long moment. Then Harold exhaled, the kind of sigh that carries years of denial. Call legal, he said to the secretary. Now! I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. That night, I stopped being the hero. I wasn't here to save reputations anymore. I was here to bury them. And the next morning, we'd all find out what that really meant. But the storm wasn't over yet. The next morning, the building felt different. Quieter. The kind of quiet that sits on top of a buried explosion. The news had spread before sunrise. HR whispered. Accounting froze mid-email when I walked past. The janitor even nodded at me differently, like he knew something had cracked above his pay grade. By 8 a.m., the boardroom was already full. Legal, compliance, the outside auditors, even 2 directors who hadn't attended a meeting in months were suddenly available. And Daniel? He showed up, press suit, calm face, no laptop this time, just a leather folder under his arm. He sat opposite me, nodded like we were about to discuss the weather. Morning, he said. Morning. He looked rested, overconfident, the kind of calm that comes from believing the system will always protect you. And honestly, it usually does, until it doesn't. At 8:05, Harold opened the session. We'll review the events of last night. Thomas, you have the floor. I didn't rush. I stood, connected my laptop, and waited for the projector to hum alive. The first slide wasn't numbers. It was a single sentence in black on white. Integrity only matters when it costs you something. No intro, no story, just that. Then came the data, timestamps, access logs, metadata from the deleted files. Each one chained together, piece by piece, like a map of betrayal. Daniel sat motionless, not a word, but I saw the pulse in his jaw. Halfway through, I clicked on a file marked Vendor Chain Cobalt Holdings, LLC. The room dimmed. The audit trail viewer opened. 3 payments. Identical amounts. Identical routing path. The last transfer by $132,000 landed in an account tagged to C Price Consulting. Your wife's cousin, I said quietly. Daniel shifted in his chair. That's not illegal? I cut him off. No. But it's unethical, unauthorized, and concealed. 3 things that ruin companies faster than bad quarters. He slammed his folder shut. This is a witch hunt. No, I said. A witch hunt is when you chase ghosts. I have your fingerprints. I hit play on the second video, this one from the night before. The sound filled the room, the faint hum of the data center, then the unmistakable click of a USB drive, and then Daniel's voice, low but audible. Come on, just finish copying. He stood, pointing. You can't. That's an invasion of privacy. The general counsel spoke for the first time. That was company property, Mr. Price, including the server you accessed without authorization. The silence that followed was total. No whispers, no throat clears. Just the sound of a man's career, cracking under its own weight. Then the inevitable defense. Thomas set me up. He's been after me for months. I let him talk, let him burn his rope. When he finished, I clicked the final file. An email thread between Daniel and a contact at one of the fake vendors. The tone was casual, confident. "We'll move the balance after audit freeze. Don't worry, they'll never check." I didn't need to add anything. The words spoke for themselves. That's when Harold leaned forward. "Daniel," he said, voice heavy, "we'll need your credentials, effective immediately." Daniel laughed, the kind of laugh people make when they've already lost. "You can't just—" "I can," Harold said, "and I will." The head of security, who'd been waiting by the door, stepped forward. "Mr. Price, please hand over your badge." For a second I thought Daniel might resist. He looked at me, not with fear, but pure hatred. The kind that comes from realizing your game is over and the referee was recording the whole match. He dropped his badge on the table. "You think this makes you a hero, Thomas? You're next?" "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'll go out honest." He stormed out. The door slammed so hard the glass trembled. No one spoke for almost a full minute. You could feel the weight of disbelief pressing against the walls. Then Harold exhaled. "Jesus Christ!" No one laughed. The auditors gathered their papers. The lawyers whispered in corners. And the board, the same people who once told me not to start a witch hunt, just sat there, stunned, their power suddenly irrelevant. I looked at each of them, calm, steady, no gloating, no triumph, just fatigue that felt like truth. "The board has a decision to make," I said quietly. "But while you're processing it, I've already taken some precautions." I slid a small folder across the table, a list of emergency steps. Daniel's accounts are locked, access revoked, legal notified, vendor contracts under review, and a full external forensic audit is already engaged. Harold blinked. "Already?" I nodded. "Started at 6 a.m. No one moved. The plan was airtight. Every window sealed before they even realized there was a fire. And that's when it hit them. Not the evidence, not Daniel's guilt, but the realization that I'd done what none of them had the courage to do. Protect the company from itself. Someone whispered, "Jesus, Thomas, you've been sitting on this for weeks?" "Months," I said. Harold rubbed his temple. "We'll reconvene after lunch. We need to absorb this." "Take your time," I replied, unplugging the laptop. I walked toward the door, the weight finally sliding off my shoulders, step by step. And then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. I turned. Harold was standing. "Thomas," he said softly, "the board will, of course, need to review your role in all this. You acted outside procedure." I paused, looked at him, and smiled faintly. "You're right. I did." He hesitated. "Then you understand?" "I understand," I interrupted. "That if I hadn't, we'd still be paying thieves to run our books." He didn't argue. He just nodded, small and tired. As I stepped out into the hallway, my reflection followed me in the glass. A man who'd just torn down the house he'd built, brick by brick, to prove it wasn't cursed. They thought I was done, that I'd burn out in the aftermath. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. Because the hardest part wasn't exposing the lie. It was surviving what came after. By the time the board reconvened, the storm had already passed. No shouting, no threats, no last-minute defenses. Just paperwork, signatures, and the sound of something bigger than pride finally collapsing. Daniel was out before noon. Security escorted him through the lobby, quiet and professional, like they were removing a ghost that had overstayed its welcome. His badge didn't beep at the turnstile. His name was already gone from the company directory. The board sat in silence for most of that day. The same people who once called him indispensable couldn't even look at each other. Harold cleared his throat, eyes fixed on the table. "Thomas, on behalf of the board." I stopped him. "Don't. Not yet." I wasn't angry. I wasn't even relieved. I was just still, like the part of me that used to run on adrenaline had gone quiet, replaced by something heavier and cleaner. The truth, maybe. Or peace. By 3 p.m., the lawyers had finished the documentation. Daniel's severance was null. The vendors were frozen pending investigation. The insurance team had already confirmed potential recovery of misused funds. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make the math honest again. That night, the office was empty. The halls, once humming with artificial urgency, felt human again. I walked past the finance floor, his floor, and stopped by his glass-walled office. The blinds were open. The desk was bare except for a pen, one of mine, the cheap kind I used to lend him during meetings. I stood there for a minute, looking at the ghost of the man who'd tried to play God with numbers. No rage, no pity, just clarity. The truth is, Daniel wasn't the disease. He was the symptom. The company had been sick long before him, sick with comfort, with blind faith, with the easy belief that success means never asking questions. So I asked one. At 8 a.m. the next morning, I called a meeting. Everyone came, directors, department heads, even the quiet people who usually hid in corners. I told them everything, not the gossip version, the real version. I told them what Daniel did, what I did, why I lied, and then I told them something none of them expected. I'll stay through the forensic audit, I said. Then I'm done. You could hear the air shift, disbelief, then confusion. Thomas, this isn't necessary, Harold said. It is, I replied. If I stay, this becomes a spectacle. If I leave, it becomes an example. They argued, of course, offered raises, bonuses, titles, the usual corporate apologies. But I was already halfway out the door in my mind. I handed over my keys, my badge, my passwords. The company I'd built was cleaner now, and it didn't need me to prove it anymore. That evening I packed up my office. One box, files, a photo of the first team I ever hired, and a notebook filled with names. People who'd stayed honest even when it cost them something. I left the pen on the desk where Daniels used to sit. Balance restored. Outside, the city lights flickered in the glass like stars trapped in a jar. For the first time in months, I didn't feel watched. I drove home with the windows down. No phone calls, no pings, no noise. Just the sound of wind and the kind of silence that feels earned. Later that week, I got a letter from legal. The funds were recovered. The fraud officially confirmed. The board cleared of negligence. Pending internal reform. And at the bottom, one line in bold. All actions initiated by CEO Thomas Keene were deemed justified and in good faith. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like exhaling. A month later, I stood outside the building one last time. The new CFO, clean record, sharp eyes, shook my hand. "We'll make it right," he said. "You already are," I told him. When I got home, I poured a drink I didn't need and sat by the window. The city hummed the same way it always had, indifferent and alive. For years, I thought loyalty meant protecting people, even from consequences. Now I know it means protecting what's right, even when it's ugly. I realized I'd been saving people who never wanted saving, and that realization didn't make me colder. It made me free. Somewhere downtown, Daniel was probably rewriting his story, finding a new company to charm, a new audience to convince. That was fine. I wasn't his audience anymore. The next morning, I woke up without an alarm. No meetings, no lies, just quiet. The kind of quiet that costs something and earns everything.